Welcome to this special edition of the Love, Truth, and Power podcast. In today's episode, you will hear from the company I keep in my heart and in my home, the people behind the power for my purpose, my husband and our 3 daughters. Let's get into it. Or when is the first time that you realized that you were a person of color? So in life, most of us just get to, live our lives, but was there a moment in time where you realized that you were a person of color?
Yeah, I have one. Oh, this is kind of weird. So the first time I realized that I was a person of color, I was 5 years old, and I was in kindergarten, and we were all coloring our angels for our Christmas tree. It was supposed to be images of ourselves, and I was the only black girl in the class, and so I was the only person that colored my angel in. And so when she hung them up, I realized that my angel was the only one that was darker and had red hair, and so I was crying, because my angels look different from everybody else's. But yeah, my teacher ended up making me feel better about it. But that's the first time I realized I didn't look like everybody else.
I think for me, being from the Northeast in Jersey, where everything was so liberal, racism was better disguised, I would put it, because I went to school with black, white, Hispanic, went to college, lived in the community. So my first experience came, unfortunately, in the military. There was an incident in our unit where a Caucasian soldier was assaulted, and he said by a black soldier. So all the black soldiers had to go to a lineup, in which I refused. It was ridiculous. But it just proved to me that we still all look alike. So that was my first experience, really, that I recognize racism. Quite sure I have experienced more in my life, but again, very well disguised in the Northeast, and just couldn't recognize it.
I think mine is probably when I was a little bit older. I think I was like 10 years old when we moved to Virginia. I think I didn't really notice it because it was a lot of like Latino people in my class when we were in Texas, but I didn't realize just how many people didn't look like me until I got to Virginia, where more people in my class looked like me.
I think because we lived on the military base, I don't have a lot of memories in Texas because I was like 4 or 5 when we moved here. So everybody around us looked different. Like it wasn't just, for me, I didn't just have a lot of black friends. I had white friends, Mexican friends, Asian friends, like in school and kindergarten. So it wasn't like a sea of white people. I don't think I noticed it until I got closer to high school. But by then, I don't know, I already felt empowered in my blackness that it wasn't a big issue. I didn't feel different.
So I think one thing that many people who are not of color don't realize is that we ourselves, when we're having an experience that makes us stand out, or that we realize we're having an experience because we are of color, that we ourselves look for reasons why we're being treated differently before jumping to it being because of our, the color of our skin. And so when people are not of color, many times they think, well, you're using your color as an excuse for everything. When the reality is that most of us are actually looking for reasons why not to go there, because to go there means, I am being treated differently in this store. I'm being treated differently within, this space simply because of the color of my skin. And so it's really difficult to come to that realization sometimes because there's nothing you can do about the color of your skin. So when was the last time or the first time that you guys realized in your own experience that you were being treated differently in a particular space simply because of the color of your skin?
I think probably maybe 5th grade when they do the one little tiny section of Black History Month, and then everybody looks to you like you're the voice of all Black people.
You're the only slave in the room.
Yeah, like you're the only one that knows what slavery is or anything that has to do with Black history.
That's true.
Like you speak for the whole room.
Right. They talk about Black history, everybody be like,
I want to say the first time that I walked into Saks, Fifth Avenue, up in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and immediately I was addressed about what do I need, what am I looking for. I'm just looking around, but not really paying attention that I was being followed through the store quietly. Someone kept coming up to me, asking me what I need, and moved into my space while I was looking and just, browsing. And then it got to the point where it was just too obvious that everyone's looking at me, being the only person of color in the store at the time, that I felt the intense racism and the profiling that was taking place at the moment.
We did a play of the Native Americans and Christopher Columbus. And I just remember they didn't know where to put me. And they ended up putting me with the Christopher Columbus and them. And the Indians were all like dark-skinned girls. So I was like, I remember didn't know how to feel. Like, I feel like I'm Black, but I guess it was more colorism than racism. But both.
Yeah.
the first time I remember being treated differently by white people is when I was like 10 years old, and this boy called me his slave and threw mud in my face and on my new coat. And I knew about racism and slavery kind of being 10 years old because we learned about it, but I didn't expect anybody to call me a slave. Or I didn't know that people were still thinking that way in like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So that was probably when it first hit me, like, I'm still going to be treated differently or looked at differently because I'm darker.
So going along with that, then my next question is, what makes you, or what has equipped you to deal with these situations? How do you deal with them, and what, where does that come from? Like, what equips you to deal with these situations when you find yourself there?
What?
So I ain't the right person to ask that. Dad, you go first.
And I will go first. I think life experience, growing up, equips me now at this age and stage of my life. First and foremost, of course, you want to just put your hands on somebody, of course. But when you have kids, when you have daughters, especially, now you're looking at how to keep them safe and how to show them by example how to deal with racism, how to deal with people of that nature. Again, for me, it had to come through experience, my experience, and how to learn how to react to racism and think about it first, right? Before I do something crazy, before my mind takes over my body. Mm-hmm. And me want to put my hands on somebody, especially when it comes down to my kids. So they have to be taught how to deal with racism.
So what would you have told those Saks clerks that were following you around? And what would you tell if you had the power to inform Saks, Fifth Avenue, and their CEO? What would you say they needed in order for your experience to be different.
And I would inform them that they need some training, that they need to understand that you just can't stereotype, and that we're not all the same. We're not all from the same makeup, and that to understand how totally inconsiderate and disrespectful it is for you to profile me and stereotype me. And if you don't understand as a CEO of a store, then you need training. You need someone to come in and teach you and your staff and make it policy on how you treat customers. There's not a stipulation of whether your customers are black or white. You're looking for customers. So just because I come in with my sweats, my tennis shoes, and my hat turned backwards, or whatever the case may be, my money's been the same. So that's just me.
I think the most helpful thing is probably having a support system, because I think my first reaction, like anybody else, is like, I definitely want to put my hands on you. But I think having a support system is the best, because like I'll call my mom or I'll call my dad or, somebody who's also been through it and understands to kind of talk you off the ledge of doing something crazy. And the same thing as my dad, I now have a child, so I have to react and show him that, for one, you have to always act civilized, and for two, I'm not going to prove to you that I am what you're saying that I am. And that's more important than anything else to me.
I would say
You were
in that particular situation, I was 10 and I was like thrown off. So I did, get physical, put my hands on them. I was a child. But what I feel like empowered me, and I was like learning to deal with those situations, was when I told my mom, and I was nervous because one, I had never been in that situation, and I knew I put my hands on somebody, so I knew that I was going to be in trouble, and whatever the reason was, I felt like was going to be dismissed. But because when I told my mom and she was upset, and then she took me to the little boy's house, and my mind trying to put you on.
No, just say it. I want it to be organic.
So when she took me to the little boy's house and talked to him and his mother, and she let them know that that was not acceptable, that his kid would not be talking to me like that, wouldn't be demeaning me, and I just remember just feeling lifted up, and that it just let me know to not be silent about it, and that I may have not done the right thing by putting my hands on him, but I knew then I did the right thing by standing up for myself, and that he was wrong, and that knowing that I had somebody that had my back and lifted me up, because I could have just been in trouble, and I would have felt bad about putting my hands on him. I would have felt bad about being a slave and not being addressed, and then I would have felt, and I would have just never known how to deal with it, and probably would have never put my hands on somebody again, and probably would have never been confident enough to address it. So yeah, anyways, my point is, I feel like I got through it by knowing that I had parents who were going to support me when I was in those situations and lift me up when somebody else was talking down to me.
So I'm glad to hear that again, because as Mexican mom to Blaxican children, it was always important to me to ensure that I was being thoughtful and intentional about my daughters, particularly in this male-dominated world, to be empowered and informed, to feel confident. So to hear, now my daughters say that was important. I'm glad that I, took the time to learn about, Black history and also my own history, to have the tools and skills to empower you guys through everything, because everything is very, slanted. And so I don't know if you guys remember, but we used to do these book clubs, at home, so that we could read books of, black heroes that had contributed and black sheroes that had contributed to the foundation of America. And so remember, we used to bring your friends over and stuff, and we would have tea time. And for me, again, that was very intentional, just to ensure that we were creating a neighborhood and an environment that would empower you guys, not just as Blacks, but also as women, right? And to know your history that you weren't being taught, in the schools. And so, again, it's good to hear. It makes me proud to hear, that at a young age, you guys had the confidence to know to be yourselves and to feel supported. And I wish there was more of those, experiences within, our communities of color.
Yeah, I think your mother did a great job of keeping pictures of color in the house and elaborating on sheroes more than heroes at that time, because being young girls, you only had one hero, and that was the man himself, the father. And that was, not to be funny or anything, but that's all you knew. Dad was doing everything he could to make to provide and make sure my girls felt comfortable in who they were. And your mother was awesome. And again, presenting pictures of color, sheroes, on a daily basis. So kudos.
I think it's kudos to both of y'all just for making us feel comfortable in our blackness before we were before the world let us know that we were black.
Yeah.
So once I experienced it, I already knew that I was a little queen.
Yeah.
So nobody can really tell me any different, because I feel like at home it was already instilled in us that we knew that we were great. That's why I can go into school and be confident when I tell my teachers, I'm not celebrating Columbus Day. I'm not participating in these projects. And I had the confidence to say that, knowing that I knew my history and my mom was going to have my back. And when they called my mom, she surely told them, no, she's not. She'll take the 0, or you can give her another assignment, because we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So I just think because y'all gave us that confidence at home, it equipped us to deal with the racism in the world.
And it makes those instances less uncomfortable, because it's like, I already know I'm not the problem.
Right.
So it's not like you feel like, demeaned, or it's going to go with me for months and months or whatever. I already know when it happened, like, okay, you have issues. That doesn't have anything to do with me.
Yeah, and I remember that conversation also, Sylvie, when they called me and said that you would, that you were going to get a 0 for not participating in the Columbus Day festivities. And I, accepted it. Many years later, though, I think about it and I say, I should have expected better of the school, and said, no, the issue is not that I should not have accepted a 0 for my daughter, who was advocating for herself in truth and power. You know what I mean? I should have expected the system to, do an educational activity that was based on truth, right? Versus trying to convince people of something in our history that never really happened, right? Like Columbus never landed here. And they didn't discover anything because, first of all, this land wasn't lost and Native Americans were already here. And so that you already had the wherewithal and the knowledge to know that that's not something that you were going to participate in. But I think, reflecting on it years later, for me, it was, I should have expected more of the system, right? To right that wrong instead of accepting a 0 for my daughter.
But I think because of that, now we can do that for our kids. Yeah. Because we ain't going for that.
Yeah. So how did the rhetoric of 45 affect you guys and your relationships with family and friends?
Well, I can say I definitely put it on Facebook that whoever in my family voted for Trump, I don't remember what I said exactly for them, but I felt like we weren't going to have a relationship after that, because he was a direct threat to my family. Him out here encouraging racism and encouraging violence and allowing people to think that the things that they were doing to us, that it's cool for them to get away with, is disrespectful to me, is disrespectful to my family. So I couldn't be friends or have a good relationship with anybody who supported that, when thank God it didn't, but it could have directly affected my family. Like if somebody was out here acting crazy and hurt one of us because they're following Trump. So I took it as direct disrespect, and yeah, just there's no room for that.
As a father, Terrell, what is your greatest, or in raising our daughters, what was your greatest concern in raising young ladies of color?
Oh, wow. My greatest concern is that, for one, that they understood the double negative, correct? Being a woman and being black. And not only that, that they understood, for one, how to deal with it. For two, most importantly for me, is how to recognize it, right? And then my other concern was to make sure that I give them the best opportunity possible to be successful in any world, be it male dominated, whatever the case may be, and how to progress and grow, you know. But back then, yes, it was hard, it was complicated. When you look at really the collaboration of me and you, right? Two different worlds, completely different. Had no clue. Had no clue of what was about to happen, right? And, you know, all I wanted to do, and your mother, was protect you guys. But that wasn't enough, because we knew as you got older, it wasn't but so much we can do once you enter the world. Once you grew of age, like I always tell your mother, when I realized you guys was grown, not to change the subject or get off track, Silvery was going to Maryland and Lyric was going to North Carolina. And I'm saying to myself, well, heck, I can't drive both of y'all at the same time. You know, not really realizing that my kids are grown. You know, they're about to get on the road and step out into this world. And there wasn't pretty much nothing I can do about it, is to make sure, hopefully, you know, that they are prepared, that I've done all I can do to get them ready for this work.
Yeah, for me as a mother raising young women, I think this is part of what has been our home climate all the time. That, you know, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that, you know, it was important to me that we had a climate at home and around you guys that did not minimize women, and that definitely did not minimize you in any way because of the color of your skin. Mm-hmm. And so I intentionally thought through and acted and kept people around you that would support me in parenting you that way. You know, women that were strong, independent, great influencers, and who wanted the same for their own, you know, daughters, and also, you know, for the friends that Daddy used to bring over to our home, that they were men that didn't feel threatened by strong, opinionated women like myself, and also that their wives were those types of women, right? So that my children could see an example. So everything for me was very intentional because of my concerns. I know, you know, growing up as a Mexican woman, that men have a really high position in voice in our culture. And so there's a lot of beautiful things in my culture, but that was not one that I appreciated, nor did I want to pass that on, you know, to you guys. And so to the point where I, you know, like I said, I always recall this kind of funny exchange, which made me think, okay, now I'm going too far in the other direction, right? And I remember telling one of you guys, because one of you came to me and said, Mom, right? It's not okay for men to hit women, right? And I said, that's right. And so one of you said right back to me, it's like, but it's okay for women to hit men, right, Mom? And so I'm like, okay, maybe dial it back some. And so I said, maybe I need to present the other side of the story as well. And so for me, everything has been intentional because I think I've been concerned about just how you as women of color would present yourself out there so that you cannot be demeaned. I wanted you to be empowered to take up your space without having to ask permission to take up this space in this world.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job of that. So when I did experience it, it was almost like a culture shock.
Yes, it was.
Because I think, and for me, I didn't get it until a long time. I think when Hillary ran was when I got it the most. And I was surprised that some people that I kept in my circle that were like, no, simply because she's a woman. I'm like, you have no problem even saying that, having that so much about, and to say it to me. So yeah, it was like, and that was what, 6 years ago, so I was like, oh, it's 1950s is still like around. It's not just history. It's still like very current.
Right. Yeah.
So what is your greatest hope for your daughters, again, of color?
My greatest hope for them is for one, first and foremost, that they come to Christ, right? And understand how the extended grace from Christ plays a part in their life. For two, that no matter what, that they be genuine and live their truth, right, of who they are and what they want to be. And don't, hesitate to think that there's nothing that they can't do in this world. And that's your process, that's your thought process as you move forward. Anything's possible. Should be obvious now, right? 2021. So for me, I think for them to live their truth, again, you always hear the saying, you only live once. You only live once, and tomorrow you can't get back. So moving forward, that they live their truth, that they're considerate of others and defend the needy. That's for me. So, my girls are wonderful. I'm their father. That's the way I think. That's the way I see them. And when they present themselves in the world, it's the same thing. It's the same feedback that I get back. So kudos to Mom, especially. They're awesome. So nothing but joy, right? Because happiness to me is overrated. Put some joy. You put some joy in your life, man. Please, you can never get it back. I hear people say that again. We discussed this, right? But I'm unhappy. You never hear anybody say, I'm unjoyful. This some bull. This some unjoyful crap. Right? You don't hear that because joy to me is the more genuine of the words, of things to come. I think joy is in the Bible also. Not sure how many times happiness is. But yeah, if they can have some joy and live their truth, man, I'm telling you, life is good.
So my greatest hope for my daughters as people of color in this world is that they take a lot of pride in their history, and that is the wind beneath their wings, that is what allows you to step out into this world with that confidence, knowing where you came from. I think it's changing that perspective for me has been important, where people think and talk about slavery. It was a terrible, beyond words history and experience, to think about the atrocities that people can commit against other people. But for me, I find that your history coming from there is that, you know, people fought to be free, and that people had the strength and the courage and the resilience to say, we are people and we can do better and we will fight for our freedom. And that's where my daughters come from that history, and from my own, you know, history as well. And knowing these are your people, like they have been through so much, and here it is only 2 lifetimes later. And I want my daughters, you know, who are women in this world of color, to walk out there knowing this is where we come from, and that is what gives us the courage, the strength, and the empowerment to say, I am here, this is how I will present myself in this world, and it's not dependent on what you think of me, but only what I think of me. And so do you guys remember the night that we stayed up waiting for the announcement that Barack Hussein Obama was going to be our 44th president? How did you guys feel that evening?
I remember I cried.
Yeah.
And at first I couldn't figure out why I was crying. But then I saw Oprah crying, and I saw, not Freddie Jackson, what's his name? Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson cried.
Not Brexit.
And honestly, because just growing up, I remember all the jokes of like, we ain't gonna have no black president.
Mhm.
Like, we too ghetto, to this, to that. The world can't handle a black president. And then I remember it just was, as much as I didn't see that much racism at that time. Well, I did once he ran. But just in my life, I still knew we had to come to a place where he's going to be the leader of the free world, like a black man. And so, yeah, I just remember crying, but feeling really proud and feeling like just a moment of remembering that it wasn't that long ago, of like Martin Luther King and segregation and Malcolm X. Like, it really not even was a lifetime ago. Mm-hmm. And to see him up there just as regal as he want to be, yeah, I was just really proud and really emotional.
I remember being like, it was shock, because I remember we did like a fake election in school.
It was shock.
Oh,
Shock. Oh, okay.
And we did a fake election in school, and he won. We were like, "Oh, this is the best we're gonna get. At least he won in Prince George." So then when it actually happened, I was kind of like, "Oh, it's not just us. Like, it's not everybody felt this way. Everybody's ready for this change." And even though I wasn't so aware of it, it was like it felt like a change that was necessary, that we needed. And it was just kind of, and I just remember the next day at school, everybody kind of like walked a little taller. Mm-hmm. Like, that's all we talked about. Some people were mad. And I remember like some of my teachers acting different too. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, not necessarily that they were proud, but almost like they didn't
like,
think,
how did this happen?
Yeah.
How did this
and
happen?
how do we address it now?
Right.
Yeah.
Y'all ain't addressed it any other president.
Yeah.
I think waiting for the results, I was extremely anxious. And then I think once we finally got the results, proud like baby. And I think I was more proud because that was my first time voting. So I actually felt like I made a difference, because there was no way that I thought that he was going to win. But I do remember feeling like immediately scared afterwards that somebody was going to do something to him.
Like when he had to walk
the inauguration. The inauguration, they walked in the parade was probably one of the scariest moments I've ever experienced.
I even thought when he walked out, I thought he was going to show.
I was holding my breath, and I think, like, you know, I was very proud, but I was immediately scared for him and his family.
But I also remember y'all having a talk with us that y'all didn't want us to go to school the next day because people were going to act out.
Be upset, yeah.
And Look, we went.
Yeah, sure
They-
did.
we knew they weren't gonna try us, but I
I'm
remember
pretty sure we
just
all
the fact
were-
that was an issue. Like we had to
Yeah.
talk about tomorrow. It might be crazy. People might like.
But we also went black as we could be with our Obama
Yeah,
shirts
Obama
and
shirts,
everything.
Yeah, I think for me, being a child of the '60s, I was ecstatic. Man, it was awesome. But I was scared for 8 years because I knew if something happened to him, the world would never be the same.
Mhm.
You know, you knew that. You knew the first black president, man. To me, I mean, it was 8 years of like, because you saw the racism starting to rear its head in
Mhm.
politics, you know, and everywhere, really.
Everywhere.
So, of course, we were extremely proud, but also, you know, there was some fear there that, you know, that something could happen to him. So,
Yeah, I remember we were all waiting on the announcement, and then once it was known, I remember all of you running to the bed, and we all cuddled on our big bed, and everybody, you know, we were all crying, and we were full of joy and stuff. And so again, you know, just bringing it back to how important it is to see people who look like you,
Right.
you know, accomplishing and then being recognized for that accomplishment, and just how much, you know, like that means to us to see that reflected, and then also to recognize you know, the fear that at any moment, you know, things can be snatched back.
Yeah.
If we're not intentional, you know, with our support and our work and, you know, in what we do and stuff. But I remember that being, you know, one of the most meaningful moments in my lifetime. And so, and, you know, you were just full of hope, you know,
Mhm.
at that moment. So,
I think also that decision also shaped the company you kept, right? Because
Yeah.
a lot of people were exposed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
I do want to say one small thing though, even though it's small, it's a big thing. When we went to school like the next day and we had like government and stuff, I think one, the teacher didn't know what to say. She was just kind of in shock. But I think I also like that, like in history class, as much as you try to ignore like that black people were something, you always go over the presidents no matter what. So you can't get rid of us now. Like he's always going to be there.
Yeah. So, as you know, young women and daughters, either now or in a younger age, what advice would you give parents of daughters of color now? Like, what, you know, what could they do that was really meaningful to you, or that even you would change in us as your parents? Like, what advice would you give to parents now raising daughters of color?
I think acknowledging it that you are a strong black woman, like that's a saying people just say, but people can often like use that against you, like black women are angry. Like don't feed into that stereotype, like you're not angry, you're a beast. Like they're scared of what you can do, and just changing the narrative how we speak on black women or women of color, and acknowledging like that they're kind of like the head of the household. Like the men lead, but nothing happens without the woman. And focusing on that and those women like that are businesswomen, owners, CEOs, all of those things, and not just angry black women.
The advice I feel like I would give is constant affirmations, especially with social media now. And you're gonna walk outside or just open your phone and see a bunch of women that you think that you should look like that aren't black, or that have smaller noses, or have straighter hair, or have. So I would just constantly give affirmations to young girls about whatever it is about their features that you know the world is gonna tear down. So before, like I said, you get outside, you already have this confidence in you, that you're beautiful. And usually if it comes from your family first, if the people you love are constantly telling you that you're beautiful, that you're great, that you're smart, you're gonna believe it regardless of what somebody on the outside tells you.
And just to piggyback that, like people, the features that people don't like or trying to change, it's not because they're ugly, it's because they're black. Like beauty is a European standard, and black people have big noses. It's like a historical thing, and that's why they try to say that it's ugly, not because it's true, but because it's a black feature.
I think probably the biggest thing is like always instilling that, and it's not even like being, you know, uppity or stuck up or whatever, but that you are everything just as you are. You can't let anybody tell you different, and don't ever try to. I think my biggest thing that even as great as you guys were that I do struggle with is that it's okay to be who you are regardless of what anybody else has to say. Like who you are is okay, and don't ever make yourself small. And let it be known that you don't have to make yourself small, and let it be known that they're going to try to make you be small, but you don't ever have to be small for anybody.
I also would say, as far as mothers, I would advise them to be more conscious to never allow yourself to be disrespected as a woman in front of your daughters. Because I just think that plays a big role. How you can't tell me that I should love myself and I need to be respected and all this other stuff, but the women I'm looking up to most in the world is just allowing herself to be treated any kind of way and in front of me. Because whoever the woman is, she's a woman first, so you're going to go through things, but you could be conscious about not allowing yourself to be demeaned or disrespected in front of your daughters, because regardless of what you tell them, they're going to go by what they see. And even if they stray away from it, like all women probably will at some point, they'll know their core and what to always come back to and how they should be treated based off of how you allowed yourself to be treated.
I think the other side of that as well is that, you know, women and parents have the power, right, to be an influence, like you were saying, Sylvia, and also an example. I remember a young boy had called one of you the B word, right? And it really infuriated me. I was really upset. And I remember taking your hand, and I know who I'm talking about, I just don't want to out you unless it's an experience you want to share. Taking your hand and going to the little boy's house and saying, talking to his mom, that he needed to apologize because he had called one of you that name. And so, and I remember not knowing how that mom would respond. And she was very upset herself and was an example to her son and said, you know, you're not to call women that name. It's demeaning. And she took the time to explain it to him. And I remember him, you know, feeling really, like really coming to an understanding at his young age. He was a teenager and apologizing. And then he has become, you know, a really good friend to you guys over time. And so I think, you know, also it's important for parents to understand that they have like such a powerful role to play when they have a higher expectation, you know, of their children. What advice would you give us? What would you have us do different? What would have been more meaningful to you? You know, as we were raising you, what is one thing you wish we would have known or done differently?
I can't say I wish I would have done anything differently. I wish I had some tragic stories to say about it, but I don't. But, and I don't know how you could have done it anyways, but I just think the only thing about us being raised a certain way that we were kind of naive and shocked when things would happen. So, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't have changed that y'all kept certain, like you said, you kept certain people around us, you kept certain types of women around us, you kept certain types of men around us, and then we always felt uplifted and protected and Black Power and whatever. But so I'd say more so like we moved off the military base, and when we got older, when things would happen, we were kind of, I don't know how to explain it. Because then I wouldn't really change what y'all did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like it made us naive, but it also was like we were like more empowered. Like we didn't think it was us. Like y'all are the ones with the
Right.
issue, not us.
Yeah, so you can scratch
Yeah.
that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that I can think of anything. The only thing I can possibly think of, and even like she said, I don't know how you would have done it differently, is that not to, like, because you guys held us up to such a high standard, I think it would have helped to know that everybody's not like that. Not to expect you from other people, even other Black people. It's not, everybody's not raised the same. And I think I didn't really realize that until like people who are your own people kind of treat you funny or think you're uppity or whatever. I think that just to reiterate that don't expect you from other people.
Yeah, I wish I would have kind of, as a child, known more about colorism, but I do feel like that's more of like a discussion now. Because I feel like, if anything, that's what I
Yeah.
struggled with more than I struggled with racism. I struggled with colorism.
Yeah, I struggle with colorism more than racism. For sure.
I think for you guys growing up is that you knew, but you had never experienced it.
Right.
Right. So that's when that naive kicks in, because even though we've talked and shared,
Right.
when you experience it,
It's
a
different.
yeah. There's a different a reaction that you're going to give. You're like, what?
Like, is this really happening?
I know we talked about this, but I wasn't supposed to see this.
Yeah, and I think like
Bull.
like even going back to like not expecting you from people, not expecting your surroundings either from everybody, because I think like even being young, like boys can be disrespectful, especially young boys, and you deal with Black boys, and I think you're like expecting daddy from a Black boy, and that's not what you're gonna get from any kid, like.
Right.
But you're still expecting it because that's all you know is all these like, you know what I mean, very well put together men who protect you and whatever, and that's not exactly what's out there. So maybe like sometimes be more aware of the big bad wolf, basically.
I'm going to speak for me briefly, is that everybody judges us, right? There's something there from everybody that you're stereotyping or you're profiling. You're listening to the rhetoric, of people of color, mainly Black men, especially. So just wanted to touch that.
Yeah, so I feel like the answer to the question for me is, if y'all could have done something different, I wish y'all would have taught us more about that part about how hard it would be for us, not just being Black in the right world or brown in the right world, but of being a light-skinned Black woman and
Being a mixed woman.
being a mixed woman, being a mixed woman, and how your own people will treat you.
So you don't go too far. I hope we get to that in one of the episodes, because that's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
Right?
We're going to have to follow back on that. We're going to have to have a whole hour for that, because I'm ready.
Right.
Yeah. That would be something that we can address in the future.
But even that, like, same like she was saying, like, I'm not sure how you could have better addressed it when you don't have the experience of being a mixed person. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Right. And I don't think we knew at the time what comes with being a mixed kid.
What
Like,
comes
you
with-
figure it
yeah.
out as you went.
You figure it
on.
out as you go, but it wasn't like something that was specifically touched on by itself.
And I don't think
it's-
mom would know that.
Yeah.
The dark skinned girls may treat you this way because
Yeah,
you're
that's what I'm
light-skinned.
saying.
Like,
I don't
she
know that
couldn't
there's
notice
any way that you could have
known that.
but it's its own thing outside of racism and whatever, being a mixed kid.
And it's very intriguing because your mother comes from a race that has a different shade of skin for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're all different colors from Latina, and your mother comes from a place where she's very proud, right?
Mm-hmm.
And me, I'm Black and I'm proud. You know what I'm saying? So that was interesting that we were looking not from your perspective of being mixed kids, but what was best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Not understanding that, right? I knew, but I don't know. We're trying to do something different at the time.
Y'all did good though.
Great. It turned out great.
I like me.
Yeah.
So, babe, as a father again, what advice would you give to other fathers raising women of color in today's world?
Wow. Oh my God.
Daddy said, do we have time?
And that's true. That's true. So many different changes and things have changed over the years. But I think one of the main components would be trust. To trust the young women. Well, building trust with your daughter, which is, man, I can't tell you how huge that was for me, and your mother helped me with that quite a bit because I saw the scope, being a child of the 60s, of how my sisters were raised very strict. And I'm quite sure your mom was raised the same way, because that was my mindset. No, y'all ain't doing jack. Nothing. It ain't happening right here. And we talked about it several times. I think trust is so important in gaining that mutual respect between you as a father and your child as a daughter who has her own mindset. And the way that women are being portrayed as if there's nothing they can't do, that's what we need to enforce, right? We need to reiterate that there's nothing that you can't do, and that the world is yours. It's yours to go out there and live your truth. I talked about that earlier. I think it's important that we support our women. Of course, we're going to give them the basics. Hopefully we bring Christ into their life. But I think trust was the biggest component that I had to work on. That took me a minute because I wanted to protect you. I wanted to protect you from everything and not giving you the opportunity to understand and go out there so I can trust you. It wasn't about you. It was about me protecting you, and that was it. But again, as I reiterated, the older you guys get, it wasn't, I had no choice. I had no choice. So I think that's what's more important, is once you build the trust, and then you can discuss everything. Because even now, you guys like to talk to your mother about everything. So when it comes to fathers, it's a little different, but you have to build that trust with your child, and empower them. And of course, I love them crazy. So